Hey, everybody, and welcome to the InfernoCast, episode 58. I am Fox, host of the podcast and of YouTube's InfernoFox gaming channel. This channel has content regarding RPGs, Nintendo, and retro gaming. And the InfernoCast here is on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. And as I say every week, friendly reminder to moderate video game playing, touch grass, and help your partner, parents, or roommates around the house. Joining me tonight for a fun topic is my fantastic cast and crew. We have the venerable Jason the 13th of the YouTube channel, Jason the 13th. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem. Always happy to be here.
And we also have joining us Hillbilly Hardicus. He is a good friend and resident hill slut. Hardicus, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We also have our resident bounty hunter, Astrimedes. He's also a developer and co-owner of Second Place Games. Astrimedes, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here, taking a break from bounty hunting.
You should. It's hard work. It is hard work. Bustin' makes you feel good, though. We also have joining here Jamie Owls 87, my partner and partner in crime. Her and I have a new video coming out this Friday. Games that we are playing. It's a monthly series that her and I do, just kind of going over the games that we have played, currently play, and have up next. Jamie Owls, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We also have Stormrosesky of the Twitch and YouTube channels, Stormrosesky. Storm, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And there's a new video that is out as of 5 minutes ago.
Ooh.
Excellent. Make sure, again, you check that out at Stormrosesky at YouTube. She's got a lot of fun content. What is this video about? If you can let us loose, let us know.
Top 3 horror franchises.
Oh, nice.
My personal top 3. I know there will be some grumblings because one specific one did not make that top 3, but he is always been my least favorite. So there you
Well,
go.
I'm still upset that Killer Clowns from the Outer Space isn't on there, but you know,
They may have been a
what can you
top
do?
20, but they're clowns. Meh.
I just watched that the other day.
It's a good one though.
Oh,
Yeah.
It-
And last but not least, with our crew is our giant purple demon dragon, Simbu Darkfang, host of live streaming video games gameplay on the Scurryface channel that's on Twitch. And make sure that you check that out. Links for that, as well as for the rest of our team here, are in the description below. Simbu, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm wondering what kind of ASL that is. Or what kind of sign that is. For those that can't hear or can't see because you're listening to us on Spotify or something. Simbu, what sort of language is that?
I don't know. I just figured I'd throw a bunch of random hand gestures. Yeah.
You know, stuff like that will
Listening,
get
it
you
was
killed in
very
certain
obscene.
neighborhoods. Yes.
Talking is overrated.
But-
we just lost a lot of listeners for
but-
that.
Talking is practically mandatory for podcasts. So
Eh.
Practically.
getting to the talking portion before we jump into the main topic, because we are in the month of October here at the InfernoCast and part of InfernoFox Gaming, we are doing a Fright Fest of sorts, as celebrating all things scary and spooky. And to top things off, we're going to ask the crew here, who is your favorite horror video game hero? So again, your favorite horror video game hero. Jamie Owls, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Who is your favorite horror video game hero?
First of all, that sounded like a tongue twister there.
Only because I was talking so poorly.
Sound like a car trying to start.
And that was even better than how I sounded.
Honestly, I really had to think about that one because I know I do play a lot of, horror games but I never really thought about which one I really like the most. Um, so honestly, the first character that popped into my mind would probably be Jill Valentine from Resident Evil.
Nice. That's a good one. But yeah,
Yeah.
Resident Evil 1, 3, and I think 5, if I know my Resident Evil lore.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Jason the 13th, how about you?
I don't play nearly as many horror games as Jamie Owl, but I almost picked the same one as her because when I was first thinking horror, Resident Evil was like the main thing that I played that was horror. But then looking things up, oh no, I got a much better pick for myself.
Oh, come on. You know you want a Jill sandwich.
Oh, that was like I said, that was almost my pick.
He's
But
thinking purple.
no, I'm not thinking purple. Not at all. His name is Jack, and he that's all. That's just Jack, and he's got some superpowers. Has to go and explore some underwater city that has a bunch of not quite zombies, but then he has to deal with little sisters and big daddies. BioShock.
I thought that was like Super Mario 2. Dang. Oh,
Yep,
that's a good
Jack.
one.
I was gonna say I had to look up his name. I'm like, what is his name? Yep, just Jack. That is
Yeah.
it. Just Jack.
Would you kindly?
But for a hero in a horror game, when BioShock is pretty much a horror game, especially the first two.
Nice.
Yep, he is definitely my favorite hero for horror games.
So speaking of BioShock, Simbu, who is your favorite horror video game hero? And I say, by the way, only because I know that you like the first BioShock.
Oh yeah.
What's horror?
What's
I have no idea what what that is. I've never heard of that genre before at all, ever. I couldn't possibly have heard of horror. So I mean, you're just gonna have to go on to the next person. You know, just I can't think of anything. Just really
Dang,
can't.
dang. So, is it that if you're spoiled for choice, you have too many?
I mean, realistically, I am spoiled for choice. I really am. The Jamie Owls and Jason 13th have already had two fantastic picks. I mean,
the problem with this question is it's the hero, not the villain.
Yep,
If it's
I
the villain,
I did that on
there's
purpose.
way too many to pick
I
from.
did
I think
that
we're
on
all
purpose.
having trouble with it, yeah, because I think particularly in a horror game, it's like in a video game already, many of the heroes don't necessarily have a lot of character kind of by default, but then in a lot of these horror games, like they have even less kind of personality because it's meant to be more of that like you're standing in for the experience. It's like the
Yep.
character's pretty much a blank slate going on this roller coaster ride in the game.
the proverbial silent protagonist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, a lot of that is set up so that you, the player, can put yourself in the hero's shoes for that immersion factor. So it's really interesting to see whom we are able to identify with the most by having them be our favorite.
I mean, like I said, it is a tough choice out of all the games. However, you know, if I'm gonna pick one, and I'm gonna come way out of pocket with this one. Now, I never finished the game. I never played the sequel. I own both of them, and this is the bad part. But I can for the life of me, I can't remember the name. I call him I call him the artist. The game is called Layers of Fear. And it's not the girl that you play as when in the real world, the one that's writing the book. It's the guy the book is about. Because the sheer of the sheer setting of insanity in the game, and of course insanity is repeating the same action over and over and over again, expecting a different hoping for a different outcome. In Layers of Fear, every time you go to him, it is the same thing. He is going basically through the same motions, through the same thing, but it's this descent into madness where there's all like I said, his descent into madness over his life, his career, his wife, his children, his child. It resonates. It really does, because as you get older, you have you get married, you have a house, you have kids, you have all this. It starts to feel your life starts getting repetitive, and not like it's a bad thing, but it starts getting repetitive. So that character seems to resonate a lot with me, because similar situations, wife, kid, bills, career, all that, kind of mixes all together. Again, if my wife or my daughter ever happen to hear any of our family members, I love my life, I love my wife, and I love my kid. Even though they piss me off sometimes, I still love them dearly, and I wouldn't change anything for the world. But like I said, you want to talk resonating with something that resonates with me.
Yeah, and I cheated and I Googled it. I think he's called the Painter, but
Painter.
it's definitely something to look into, especially Jamie Owl's Layer of Fear. I'm not sure if you played that one.
I did a couple years ago.
Ah.
Yeah, that was an interesting game.
Storm, how about you? Who is your favorite horror video game hero?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. When you play Friday the 13th, okay? Jason Voorhees would be my favorite hero.
A loophole.
Because I'm getting rid of the camp counselors that are not supposed to be there. So,
Which you're talking about the game that got canceled and isn't
yes, but I do have, another one, Herman Wolf from the Zombie Army trilogy. He was one of my favorite characters to play as, and he was an elite sniper, so
nice.
Getting to kill zombies with him and listen to the fun dialogues and little stories and whatnot. So yeah, Herman Wolf would be it, and Jason Voorhees.
Nice.
Just because.
Now, Particus, how about you? Who is your favorite horror video game hero?
There was quite a few that came to mind as I really started thinking about it. Jill Valentine was definitely up there. Thinking back to some of the games that have really stuck out in my mind, like Parasite Eve with Aya and Regina and Dino Crisis were both picks that kind of went up there. But thinking more recently, and it's more of a duo. It's Joel and Ellie from The Last of Us. Those two were just, I thought, they played well off each other. They had, good chemistry and fought a lot too. So I think that combo was probably my favorite in any kind of horror game, especially recently. Unless I want to go for comments, then I could say Abby, and we could piss some people off.
Well, I was going to say technically Ellie is the bad guy in the second one, because the true good guy is Abby.
Debatable. There's debatable. We're not going to get into that.
I was going to say Joel and Ellie are very high up on my list, but I had a feeling somebody would take them, so I changed my pick.
Okay.
Oh, that's too funny. And I was also looking up Herman Wolf. So that's an interesting. Anytime that you can kill, zombies, and the party that they were affiliated with especially is always a good thing. So really good pick there, Storm. Now, Astrimedes, how about you? Who is your favorite horror video game hero?
So yeah, for the aforementioned reason, like I think I had a hard time picking something. Like I played, maybe a medium amount of horror games overall, whatever I'd say. But sort of partially for gameplay mechanics almost, and also just because he's fun in terms of how he's described in the game World of Horror, which is an indie game that's kind of like a turn-based adventure game, sort of, where you solve cosmic horror mysteries, and there's kind of turn-based combat stuff in it too. There's a character named Haru who's he's a Yakuza, and he starts off with cigarettes, which in the game give you a combat bonus, but he also starts with nicotine withdrawal, which means when you're not smoking cigarettes actively, you get a bunch of penalties. So, and cigarettes are expensive in the game. And so I think it's a fun kind of like mechanic, and it was a fun way to use the existing like systems in the game to like give items to a character to like have mechanics that enforce like his sort of personality, like a Yakuza, and being the guy that starts with nicotine withdrawal danger and cigarettes, whatever, is pretty fun. But yeah, I had a hard time picking because I feel like most of the time horror game protagonists are very kind of blank, but I think more than almost in any other genre, I actually really, if I have a character to grab onto, I find like the horror is just a lot more effective for any kind of horror story in any media, really.
Nice. Yeah, that's definitely a good one. And that's what makes horror so visceral and immersive. And really honestly, I feel like immersion is one of the biggest reasons why you play video games. You get to put yourself in certain fictional situations, worlds, and what have you. And sometimes people really like to have that sense of fear, or that even sometimes that sense of dread, or that sense of isolation. Which really gets us to our main topic, especially those last two and that last one, and that is Metroid. With us talking about Metroid, I don't know if the series itself is truly intended to be scary, but some of the monsters and some of the gameplay elements have fear-based elements in them. If you played the newest Metroid game, Metroid Dread, that absolutely has a number of that like fear element with it. So a brief history with this, focusing on the first entry. It was released in 1986 on the NES, developed by Nintendo's R&D 1 team, and was created and produced by Gunpei Yokoi. And for those who love useless Nintendo facts, Yokoi was the same guy who developed the original Game & Watch handheld games, and who would develop a little bit later a handheld that sold pretty well. I don't know if you guys heard of it. It was called a Game Boy. He made that. This entry, Metroid, was a pioneer for video games in a number of ways, because Metroid, it was one of the first in the literal genre-defining games of Metroidvanias. It's half the genre name. It's also one of the first password-based NES games. The Japanese version of it for the Famicom was disc-based, so players could save their games on discs. And then finally, it was also one of the first games to feature a female protagonist. See, listeners, Metroid was woke before woke was even awoke, except that's not, if you define what the word is, that's not that anything to do with it. But let's focus on Metroid again and ask our cast and crew. Jason the 13th, I'm hearing you laughing over there. You're going to be my first victim for this question.
Yeah.
Have you played the original NES Metroid?
Yes, I have.
And have you played the remake on the Game Boy Advance at all?
I'm trying to remember if I have or not.
Because there was the two Game Boy Advance Metroid games. There was Metroid Fusion, which is the sequel to Super Metroid, and then Metroid Zero Mission.
Ooh, I know I played the Fusion, and I'm pretty sure I played Zero Mission. I'm trying to remember if I played the remake though.
Because Zero Mission is the remake.
Oh, then I just know it is Zero Mission. I'm sitting going like then yes, I have played a little bit of that at least.
Gamer status revoked.
Hey, I wasn't thinking of Zero Mission as the remake. I'm just thinking, oh, they remade Metroid, like. But yeah, okay.
Nice. Astrimedes, did you play any of those the original NES Metroid or the remake on the GBA?
Yeah, I played the original Metroid on the original NES hardware. I believe I also had it on Virtual Console, maybe some kind of Virtual Console. I definitely played in emulated form somewhere before. Also, I always liked the original. I think when I had it when I was younger, I never actually got all that far. If I remember correctly, it was just password-based saves, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, I think I had like lost the password multiple times or something. I always liked the game. I would play it a lot, but it would be like starting from the beginning over and over again, basically. But yeah, I really liked I liked kind of the vibe, I would say, a lot of Metroid 2, like it always, or the original Metroid, not talking about Metroid 2. Felt very lonely.
Yeah, and that's a true uh that's a true thing with the Metroid. Okay, a good portion of the Metroid series is that feeling of isolation. I think it's
Yep.
one of those that the series is, when it does it and it does it well, it really does it well. And then there's just some entries where they sort of not eliminate it, but sort of don't isolate the player as much, like Metroid Fusion. I tend to not like the ones that that don't isolate the player as much. So like I'm one of the few that don't care for, or I don't like Metroid Fusion as much. I'd probably give it like a 5 out of 7. No, I'd probably like a 7 or 8 out of 10 versus some of the better ones. Of Metroid Prime 3, I also don't like near as much because of the how not isolated that is or was. But yeah, that's a whole part of, really being with the series. Storm, how about you? Have you played or heard of the OG, the original NES Metroid?
I've seen the old Metroid played, but I never, I myself have never played it. So my experience with anything Metroid is using Samus as a character to play in Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah, nice.
That's about as far as my personal experience goes, but I did watch your brother play a little bit of the Metroid. The old one, I think it on the Nintendo Switch Online with the
Ye-
Nintendo Online things. That's
Yep.
where I've seen it.
Yeah,
So
it's nice because nearly every single actually a great majority of the Metroid games are available on the NSO service and NSO expansion pack service. Like all the NES one, the Game Boy one, both Game Boy Advance, Super Nintendo, and then the Metroid Prime remake, which is probably one of the best Nintendo Switch games, obviously is available on the Nintendo Switch. Hence me saying it. So um Hardicus, you've played the NES Metroid, right? Did you do any of the Game Boy Advance ones?
Yes, I have. I played the original, never beat that one though. I did play the Game Boy ones, Zero Mission, Fusion. Wasn't there one for Game Boy also?
Yep.
But I can't remember offhand. But
That was my favorite one, actually.
yeah,
Really?
Yeah, Samus, what was it
Returns was
called?
it?
Returns. Yeah, Samus Returns. That's it. I was trying to remember the subtitle.
Yeah, I've played those ones and the
Hard,
new Dread.
Hardicus and Astrimedes, did you guys play the AM2R, the Metroid 2 remake available on the PC?
I did not.
No, I,
I really recommend looking into it. AM2R. It uses the
AM2R, it's called.
Yeah, it uses the engine for like Metroid Zero Mission, but like imagine like a full screen on a a full screen thing, and it remakes the second one even better. I think it's better than the actual Nintendo made 3DS remake of 2.
Hmm.
That one again, Metroid Samus Returns is the shirt that I'm wearing. Um, I like it better because I don't like the circle joystick on the 3DS. That's literally the only reason why I don't like the circle joystick. I've said that many times here. So,
Okay, I'll
Simbu,
check that one out.
yeah, definitely recommend it. If you guys can find it, I absolutely recommend checking it out because the Nintendo Ninjas probably have managed to try and eliminate that, but yeah, I'm sure archive.org's probably got it somewhere. So, um, Simbu, did you play the original NES Metroid or see your cousins, or did you play any Metroids really that much?
Well, see, I was lied to. I thought we were going to be talking about Armageddon, the fantastic movie starring Bruce Willis and, Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler.
I think
But-
we all need to go to Simbu's house and raid his stash.
I think his
Mine.
stash is probably like spiked with something, so maybe that's not a good idea.
Well, the stuff that you would raid, yeah.
He's like a squirrel. He's got a fake pile loot, and then he's got his real one somewhere else.
Exactly. I've tried the original NES Metroid. I don't know. I just couldn't. It wasn't really my thing. Couldn't really get into it.
Yeah, and I've actually created a video about that, the original NES one. I'll link it in the description below about how I felt that the game was good for its time, but I didn't feel like it aged that well. So if you're a new like you're new to the series, I absolutely do not recommend playing the OG NES Metroid because a lot of it feels stiff. A lot of the mechanics are not friendly to new players of the series. And just there's the whole fairness level because if you die, you come back
NES
with only,
hard.
yeah, well, and you only have 30 health. And there's no place to regenerate your health besides killing enemies. And you kill an enemy, you might get uh capsule of health for 5 that gives 5, but then you touch an enemy, it might damage you for anywhere from 7 to 30. So yeah, that's not fun. The only way to actually fill your health completely is by finding an energy tank, which increases your overall health by 100. So yeah.
And well, before we pass things along, Fox, you never answered your own pre-discussion top question by gushing over Doomslayer.
So I was going to use my answer as a segue, and I would say my favorite horror video game hero would be heroine, and that would be Samus Aran. And so that brings us to our topic today, Metroid. I don't know if the series itself is truly intended to be scary, but some of the monsters and even some of the gameplay. Had Astrimedes not given me such a good segue, I would have used that. But yeah, and again, it's questionable whether or not Samus and Metroid could be considered horror, but a lot of the visceral elements that I tend to see with horror games, especially watching Jamie Alice play them, can be in play with Metroid games, especially stuff like Metroid Dread, or even having like 7 health left and you're like 3 screens away from an energy tank in the original NES Metroid. Yeah, that can be kind of scary too. But one of the things with the original Metroid, is, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of the original artists, Yoshio Sakamoto. Sakamoto had stated Ridley Scott's film Alien was a huge influence to the OG Metroid. Sakamoto himself is quite known within Metroid fans, as he directed one of the best games ever made, and that'd be Super Metroid, as well as future Metroid games like the somewhat recently released Metroid Dread. So I'm gonna go back to Alien, and I'm gonna start off with Jason the 13th. Jason the 13th, have you ever seen Alien? And knowing what you know about Metroid and what I mentioned, do you see similarities to Alien and the Metroid series as a whole?
Oh, I've definitely seen Alien.
He's lying.
Mhm.
Lying.
Oh, that's up there, my top favorite
Lying.
movies. But actually, up until now, I've never really thought about how Metroid and Aliens, like, they never felt the same or anything like that to me. But now that you brought it up, I can see a lot of similarities where you got a queen, you got basically the Metroids are face huggers. I mean, I see where they were going with that, and where certain aspects are definitely taken from the Alien franchise.
So Jamie Owls, same question. Obviously you've seen Alien because when I saw it for the first time, I think last year, you saw it with me. So knowing that you've seen me play Metroid and I've fanboyed a bit to you about the series and Samus and everything, do you see any similarities from watching me play Metroid and the Alien series?
Oh yeah, I can definitely see the whole scientific aspect of it. Like I can definitely see like how they copied Alien to make Metroid to make it similar. Um and also Ridley being the villain. It's funny how they use Ridley as the name for the villain. But yeah, I can definitely see it. Just like the layout of it, it's almost similar to the ship itself when you go through the levels. It kind of reminds me seeing the like when Ridley's running through the ship to try to get away from the alien.
Um, Now, how about you, Hardicus? What sort of similarities? And I'm assuming you've seen, the 1979 classic Alien.
I have. It's been a
Uh,
long time, but I have.
any similarities with that series and Metroid?
I think Jason and Jimmy kind of nailed it right there. The little Metroids are definitely kind of have that whole, attach and face hugger type aspect. Ridley, like to me, even has some physical characteristics of an alien, that kind of lanky, black, wet looking body and the claws. It's obviously they had to change it, to not be sued, but I think the Ridley character has some real, characteristics that are quite the same as the aliens.
Yeah, and it should be noted that the main hero, Ellen Ripley, naming the villain Ridley, that is meant to be a nod to the Alien series. Same question, Astrimedes. What are your thoughts on this? Similarity between the Aliens and Metroid series?
Yeah, I could definitely see it. It's one of those things where playing the game, it definitely doesn't feel in any way like an adaptation of Aliens. Like my initial reaction is almost like basically that like the actual similarities are pretty superficial, like when you play it. But, thinking backwards, knowing that that was in mind. And of course, I'd always thought, like, oh, Ridley, that's weird, isn't it? That there's that boss Ridley that, yeah, as as Hardicus mentioned, has similarity to a certain xenomorph looking creature. But yeah, it's like in a way the similarities are kind of surface. I mean, the most obvious thing is basically like, female lead, sci-fi setting, and alien enemies. And like that alone, very broadly speaking, like there's probably only really a handful of games that like fit into that kind of category. So it's sort of unique, and just by meeting that very broad category, you could argue it's similar to Aliens almost, just in terms of distinguishing it from other games. But the loneliness, I was thinking to myself too with this question, like because it's a common almost trope in a lot of sci-fi movies to run around to different areas of the ship for different reasons. Like, is that kind of like a Metroidvania?
Only if they gain an ability that allows them
Only
to
if they have to
access a
backtrack,
previously
which they often
inaccessible
do.
part. So,
Now this area is full of acid. That probably happened at some point in an Aliens movie.
it could. A couple of things for that I was thinking about was how at the end of Alien you have Ripley in her underwear, and technically, if you finish the original NES Metroid, you get Samus in her underwear. Both of them have the same exact
In her
hair at
combat
the end.
bikini.
Yeah, you could say that, either that or underwear, whatever floats your boat there. The same, literally like the same long curly hair, though future Metroid games designate Samus as a blonde. I think even starting with the second one. I could be wrong on that because it's black and white. I can't tell what her color hair is. And then there's almost H.R. Geiger style art motif that is somewhat present with the OG NES one. Really more present with like the last area Turian with the metal contraptions and the grays and whites and everything mixed in with some of the reds and on the wall and the doors and everything like that. I think if you had a more powerful system, you could achieve that sort of adaptation or inspiration better. Like I think something like Axiom Verge truly Axiom Verge is a Metroidvania, similar, very, very similar to Metroid, but has that art, that true H.R. Geiger style inspired art from Alien. You can really tell that. But
Yeah, now that you mentioned it, the what are they called? The something with the CH, the ones that like hold the power-ups for you. That's kind of like Space Engineer like almost in terms of like the alien whatever what are they called? Space Engineer, the character they find that ends up being the Prometheus character, whatever. Like
oh yeah,
that kind of
the
thing
Chozo.
reminds those statues. Yeah, Chozo, is
Mhm.
that what it is? Those statues feel a little reminiscent of like that sort of thing to me now that we're thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a good call out. Because it's funny, I have the Metroid knowledge, but I don't have as much of the Alien one. But yeah. Um, so kind of moving from the NES Metroid release from 86, we get the second one released for the Game Boy 91, the best in the series, Super Metroid 94. Funny enough, one hallmark with the series overall is the large gaps that can occur between releases. As a Metroid fan, I myself, we suffered that between Super Metroid and Metroid Prime and Fusion because it took 8 years before another entry would come out. That, of course, being Metroid Fusion on the Game Boy Advance and Metroid Prime on the GameCube. So what's interesting with this 3D entry is players control Samus in like a first-person view, continuing the GameCube's trend for Nintendo seeing its first-party franchises have really unconventional releases. So this is more of a parallel to the odd release, the odd type of games or gameplay elements with the GameCube itself, such as like Mario with a squirt gun or Link who's a cartoon as cat eyes, two people on a single Mario Kart, a terrible Star Fox action platformer. I could keep going when it comes to the GameCube. Kind of going to Metroid Prime. Just ask you guys if you have played Metroid Prime on the GameCube or its remaster on the Switch. Does or did the idea of this moving into first person deter you from wanting to play the game or any others like it, even if the core game itself doesn't play like a first person shooter? Hardicus, what are your thoughts on that?
Never played any of the Prime games, and it was specifically because it went to first person. I cannot play first person on console controllers. To me, that's always a keyboard and mouse type thing. Yeah, I mean that's really what it boils down to. Is I had no interest in playing first person Metroid either.
That's
I've
interesting.
heard they're
And I
good though.
know, oh God.
I'm just saying I've heard they're good, but I don't know. First person really doesn't really do it for me on most titles.
So you gotta have the keyboard or mouse to do it, right?
Oh, for me, absolutely. Like I don't. It's impressive the people that can play those first person shooters with a console controller. Like I don't have the hand eye coordination for it, I guess.
And one of our mutual friends too has gets really bad motion sickness when it comes to certain first person shooters. I know this particular one, Metroid Prime, that Nintendo likes to bill as a first person adventure because they don't want it to be oh we don't make first person shooters, first person adventure. They like to build that, but it still doesn't change the fact that like the motion sickness was very much there. I remember when I played it in 04 and our buddy came over and he couldn't watch the game simply because like you're moving and the screen kind of moves with you. And when you jump and you land, the screen kind of goes like that. And it's almost like how Doom is when you run and you kind of see the gun running in front, like swaying in front of you, and it doesn't match how you're moving. I totally get that. Um, Jason the 13th, what are your thoughts?
Well, I didn't care for first-person shooters much before Metroid Prime, but I liked the Metroid series enough that I picked up Prime, played it, and I love the Prime series. I think it played really well, actually, and playing the Metroid Prime series, getting me into that first person, it's what let me play more Halo. It let me play BioShock because it's the same kind of gameplay, in my opinion, to where it's led me down that path. So I really enjoyed the Metroid Prime series. I get that it's completely different than the original ones, but I don't think in to me, Metroid still felt like Metroid, even though it's completely changed its gameplay.
Yeah, because it still is literally a Metroidvania, just third party, and everything that goes with that, finding all the abilities, seeing how some of them translate into that 3D type environment. Some of them, a lot of them really do. I'm gonna say some of them, like the second one's Screw Attack and Space Jump, really don't, really
Yeah.
didn't really translate that well. Um, and one of the things I was thinking of with Metroid Prime, with one of the things that actually you Jabroni, one of my buddies, had told me that he also, like Hardicus, had an issue getting into the 3D first person type Metroid games because of the fact that when you play as Samus in these 2D things, she moves pretty quick, and especially when you get like this the speed dash, like in the Metroid Prime games, she moves like a tank. It's really slow, and all three of them do not have a speed dash type ability. So, and I remember that specifically being like a turnoff. Um, Simbu, did you ever check out any of the Metroid Prime series? Have you seen them, or seen your cousins or I play that?
Nope, I have not. But I have the only thing that I can equate to the previous question would be the only reference to anything alien or alien related is the phrase "game over." They stole it from Bill Paxton, Aliens.
And it's
The
funny,
game over on the screen.
Game Over never appears once on the OG Metroid game.
It does.
Because when you die, it just goes right to your password.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a game over. Same thing.
Nope, but it doesn't say it. And so that's one reference that is not there. But you get points for trying in a follow-up question with how much that you like BioShock. Any interest in trying the Switch version of Metroid Prime?
I mean, if I could borrow it from somebody, I might.
Okay. So if
I have no
if
I have
if
no desire to buy it.
one of your friends here or one of your cousins, say, had a physical copy of Metroid Prime Remastered, you would not be averse to borrowing it and giving it a shot.
No, you can ask Jason the 13th. I still have his copy of Breath of the Wild here. And still can't get into playing it.
Hey, and that is a-okay. That is, I still give it, dude. I still give you huge props for giving a lot of these games a try. You know what I mean? Like, seriously, man. But before I move on to the next question, let me ask, because this next question, actually, Astrimedes, I'm going to hit you with two of them. What have you thought about playing the Metroid Prime series? Did you play that CM at all?
I did actually. I am on record as not being a fan of first person games in general. I'd say a little more willing to try them then. And I do think they actually did a pretty good job of trying to make it feel like a, as you said, kind of first person adventure, like the different visors. And it felt like, okay, you are getting like a ton of like interesting feeling little like, oh, ecological tidbits about the world you're on. You feel like a real space explorer. So I think they actually did capitalize on that pretty well. I mean, at its core, yeah, it was still like a shooter, and the platforming stuff was super awkward and did not translate at all. I only played the original Prime. Like, I would give them kudos for trying really hard to not make it just feel like a shooter. I did not play any other ones beyond that. I may have beaten it because I think I owned it on the GameCube. But yeah, I may have beaten it. Yeah, points for trying is what I'd say about Metroid Prime.
Hey, I mean, you beat it. I think you're probably the out of us. I think you're the third or fourth of us that have done that. So that's good.
I might be wrong. I definitely played it a lot. I may have beat it. I'm actually hazy on whether I beat it, but I probably at least got pretty far.
No, that's
I go
that's
ahead.
definitely good. So my next question though, for you, Astrimedes specifically, and then I'll open this to up to anybody else that'd be interested, is why do you think Nintendo was so keen to develop such different playing games for its first party franchises on the GameCube? Because I'd mentioned how Mario, Squirt Gun, Cartoon Link, Terrible Star Fox.
Yeah, I think like it had to do with like where the kind of console market was at the time. Given like, I think the same year GameCube came out, the Xbox first iteration of the Xbox came out. At this point, PS2 was really dominant. So I think like it makes sense that they would take an approach that's like, let's keep our old franchises slash players kind of along, but let's change things up to try to like invite in new players. And I wonder if, decisions like doing more first person games. I don't remember at the time if it was like a thing yet, really, that there were more shooters and stuff on the Xbox. But if it wasn't already, it feels prescient almost that they would have decided to start putting more games like that on their console. I think also like the GameCube was maybe the last time I can think of where like Nintendo actually had a pretty solid hardware in terms of like a console. The GameCube was actually pretty impressive. It had decent, like very decent graphics card for the time and everything. And hardware wise, it was no slouch, basically. So I think like the GameCube, it made sense to try to do stuff like Metroid Prime that for the time was pretty graphically impressive.
No,
Just
that's
another way to
excellent.
draw new players in too.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot of some of the real lovers of stuff like hardware performance and graphics just laud what Metroid Prime did back on the GameCube. I mean, to this day, knowing what system that was for and knowing that was released in 2002, man, I'm old. But it's 22 years old and it still looks as good as it does for the time. That is absolutely impressive. Jason the 13th, same question. Why do you think Nintendo? Because you were there with me when we picked up our GameCubes. I remember we went to Funko Land. It wasn't a midnight release, but we went and picked it up. Why do you think Nintendo was so keen to develop such different playing games for first party franchises?
That not 100% sure. I'm the other than what Astrimedes was saying, that they gave it a whole new twist, kind of sucked in players from the Xbox and PlayStation, and it was, as far as I know, at that time, it was like the only like first person shooter for Nintendo. So I I don't know what made them choose Metroid to do this with, other than that, hey, it's a name that everyone knows, so maybe we can get a whole new group of people in, and then the older players that know the series, like me, even though I didn't play a lot of first-person shooter games, hey, I'm still gonna get the Metroid game because I like the Metroid games and play them. So Nintendo does things that nobody else does, and you can just see that by looking at each system that they've thrown at us, because they just keep throwing all brand new stuff out. So I've never really questioned why they do it. They just do random things sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, and shoot, there was one of the few times where they released their own first party horror game, being the Eternal Darkness and Sanity's Requiem. One of the very few times Nintendo has had a horror game. Although they were billing that Emio, that Smiling Man, that was supposed to be a horror game. I know a lot of people were disappointed that ended up being a visual novel, but I mean, I've heard, for those that like that genre, it's actually a really good visual novel horror type game. So kind of getting back on, actually, I want the devil's advocate opinion on this. So of course I got to call on Simbu, um Simbu, because I always value your devil's advocate opinion. Your thoughts on why Nintendo was so keen to develop such different games for its first party franchises on the GameCube.
Well, as Nintendo has been doing and been the dominant force in this what do you call it, prototyping or whatever with console standards, it's adapt or die, plain and simple. The Xbox, they saw all the success with the PlayStation 1, with the new games, with the new style of gaming. Nintendo continued with the Metroidvania platforming sort of games. So now you have the original Xbox and the PS2 that are now pushing the boundaries, that are now pushing all these new styles of games, that's bringing these, what you could only find on a PC, bringing that to a console, to your TV screen instead. So, in my opinion, it came to Nintendo like, well, we've got to do something different because, yeah, we're still going to have the fan base, but we've got to evolve. We've got to do something new. If we don't do something new, well, then guess what? Here goes Mario. Bink, 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 bink. But then you got, right. But the thing is you got all these all these other games that are coming out, like the wild success of the original Halo, just the massive success of that game. And when Nintendo took a look at everything and goes, well, what character could we use that could work for a first person? I'm sorry, but Super Mario in first person is not going to work. Zelda in first person really isn't going to work.
I do have to say, and this apparently Nintendo has refuted this, but I still think to this day the fact that Metroid Prime 2 has a multiplayer is because of Halo. Continue.
Oh,
sorry.
I will sit there and I will 100% agree with that. Anything that, like, again, because yeah, you had co-op and you had multiplayer on, the PS1. You've had multiplayer before. But the thing is that, again, you got to take it back to Xbox, who after the 360 really hasn't done diddly squat. But, that massive Bungie success known as Halo, where it brought all the gamers together, and multiplayer and first person action shooter, which really then set up Call of Duty to become as big as it is. I know there's gonna be some Call of Duty fans that are gonna jump in the comments and go, "You're stupid, shut up." Call of Duty. Okay, it's fine. If that's how you want to stick yourself in at night, go right ahead. But we all know Halo Combat Evolved was the first person shooter that realistically put it on the map for a wide audience.
Yeah, you're correct. I say my thought process is that GoldenEye was the first person shooter that could prove it could be done on a console, but it was Halo that really, they created the dual stick control scheme, and it was that proved that you could do first person shooters on the system. I know that, for our friendly PC friends, that still like the mouse and the keyboard. That's a-okay. But for us console players who like our aim assist, we've got our dual sticks. We can definitely play that way, which is, it's funny when you think about like Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime did not have dual stick gameplay at all. It was a thing where one joystick controls Samus, and then the other switches the beams, which is really freaking weird when you, after so many years of dual stick gameplay, which is why I appreciate Metroid Prime Remaster, because it has the additional control scheme where it has dual sticks. And like, because the original didn't have that, right? Only way to shoot stuff and look is to hold down a lock button. Samus can't move, but she can use the same joystick to look up and down and fire at stuff.
Right.
It's
They-
really. Oh, sorry, Simbu,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish
I was gonna say it's really weird, and then you got a lock-on button that helps to aim us to lock where Samus. That's why I like Metroid Prime Remastered. I still think it's the best version because it has dual sticks. And honestly, maybe it makes the game a little bit easier to play, but I think that's a quality of life. I think that's what it should be. Go ahead, Simbu.
So it's funny not having played Metroid Prime, but do you know what similarity and what possible inspiration for that movement control was? It's another lesser known series. Nobody really knows about it. The original Resident Evils.
Go, that's like tank
Because
controls, right?
You cannot move Jill and fire at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Jill has to be
You have to hold down
stationary.
a knee.
It was a
You
classic
have to
feature
hold
of
down
the
a lock,
old ones,
just like Metroid Prime. You have to lock your character to start aiming.
That's funny. And Resident Evil coming out in 96, 6 years later with Prime coming out, that was still a thing. So it just further adds emphasis to what Simbu's saying, how much Halo blazed the trail for first person shooters. But it was Metroid Prime 3 that really took advantage of the Wii motion control to point the screen. And sorry,
Yeah.
my fans. If Simbu's got the controversial Call of Duty thing, I've got the controversial one that I hate motion controls. I hate
as,
it.
as much as I
I don't
liked
think
a
that's
lot of
controversial.
Wii games and 3DS games, I do not agree. I'm not on the bandwagon as to motion control, and the 3DS joystick were the best options.
Ugh.
But hold on. If we're going to throw controversies, I want to throw one more. And this is going to be directly at everybody that loves Call of Duty. I never want to hear any of you disparage or talk bad about a game series called Medal of Honor. Without Medal of Honor, Call of Duty wouldn't exist.
I think that's fair. I do. I do. I think that's fair. Just with and honestly, let's be real here. Chances are the people who play Call of Duty won't listen to this podcast, because this podcast goes over a wide subject of video game topics. People who play Call of Duty usually
are sucked into
No.
just Call of Duty.
Oh yes, yeah, sorry. Yep, they're just playing Call of Duty. Just like the people who play FIFA, they probably just play FIFA. So as we wrap things up here, just a quick question for you guys. I know again, not all y'all have played Metroid games. Jason the 13th, what's your favorite Metroid game?
Oh, that's a hard one, because it's either Prime or Super Metroid, and they play so different. It's hard to pick one or one over the other. Oh.
Hardicus, how about you? What's your favorite Metroid game?
I think it's probably Super Metroid. The Game Boy Advance ones, the Zero Mission and Fusion were both really good. Dread was really good, but overall, I think it's Super Nintendo, the Super Nintendo one. That
I
was
still
excellent.
kick myself. I have not played Dread.
What the
Still
flip?
kick myself on that.
Oh,
How? Because
I've played
Inferno
like
made
every
me
other
play
one.
that.
you and your backlog. I swear.
Oh my God, my backlog is horrible.
Anytime I talk
Yeah.
about backlog stuff, I got to reference you because your backlog is atrocious.
Oh yes.
Astrimedes, how about you? Favorite Metroid?
I only played. I think Super Metroid probably is kind of like the superior Metroid game, at least among up to that SNES era where I kind of paid attention to Metroid games. I didn't actually play it all that much though. I've only played it kind of in bits and pieces. But of the ones I've actually played which are basically NES Metroid and Game Boy Metroid 2, I would have to say Metroid 2 and that scary old spinach green monochrome Game Boy screen, I think just enhanced the kind of weirdness and the strangeness of it.
That's yeah, because that did have some strange elements to it. And for the rest of you three, I'll ask you that question, but I don't think you guys really have played much Metroid. Maybe let me know of a Metroid game that you've seen, maybe you'd like to try. Jamie Owls, favorite Metroid or Metroid game that you've seen me play, maybe you'd like to try.
I was gonna say that my favorite Metroid game that you played, for me personally, I would probably try the Metroid Dread, and I believe it's Metroid 4 that I've seen you played in the past. I
Gotcha. Because that's Metroid Fusion, the Game Boy Advance.
Yes, yeah. I have tried Super Metroid last year. I kept dying, so maybe I'm not meant to play Metroid. I don't know. I could
I
give it another shot. We'll see.
I know Metroid Dread it has different levels of difficulty. I think there's an easy difficulty. That might be up your alley. And again, there's no shame in doing an easier difficulty, especially with a game like Dread, because honestly, Dread is the hardest Metroid game that I've ever played, especially that last boss.
If there's a level that is meant for children, I would need that level.
I can confirm there probably isn't. There is a level in Dread called Dread difficulty. If you get touched by an enemy once, you immediately die. So that would probably be bad for you.
It would.
One shot. One
Um,
shot difficulty.
yeah. Storm, how about you? Favorite Metroid game or probably more salient, what would be a Metroid game that you would like to play or try?
Well, first I'm gonna go back and answer the alien question that you skipped me on.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Yes, I can see now that you point out the similarities between the two and seeing the bit of gameplay, it's like, oh, those little Easter eggs that they put in were really nice or are cool, like they obvious can't be so obvious, but I like when creators will do that. Like the Scream franchises are notorious for hiding little bits of other horror movies or not giving nods to them. So I like when creators do that. So even if it's subtle as, naming the boss Ridley or giving her the same hair, and like at the end of the movie you see um Ripley revealed and just stand in her bikini, and then you see Samus in her underwear, but that's the big reveal, was that Samus was a female all along. So you're seeing them, I'm air quoting, naked as they really are, right? And gotta love horror for making strong women characters all along. Anyway, horror being one of the woke things forever and ever and ever, as so it'd be eye roll. But I have some interest in trying Prime because it being a first person shooter, I'm not all that great at some of the side scrolling jump and fights and platforming, blah blah blah. Some of those games frustrate me the most out of any type of game. And if I die easily and have to redo one level just to get back to the level I keep dying at, I I will get discouraged and quit. So the fact that the Prime maybe first person shooter, that's a bit of a different and another selling point. So maybe I would like to check it out on the Switch instead of avoiding it.
Yeah, and it's nice too that it's solid 60 frames per second the entire time on the Switch. I've never experienced slowdown, and the bosses are like puzzle bosses too. There's some skill involved, but you got to know the right weapon for the right time and everything like that. So yeah, definitely recommend checking that out. And Simbu, hopefully Simbu, we've sold you on a certain friend or a certain cousin to let you borrow Metroid Prime Remastered. Any other Metroid maybe that would catch your eye, or if you've played Metroid, if you had a favorite?
My all-time favorite Metroid is Space Invaders.
That's the precursor before the precursor.
Exactly. They haven't landed yet. They haven't landed, forced us to go up there and find them. So Space Invaders is the original precursor to the precursor for Metroid.
Yeah, that was a pretty addictive game.
And a small trivia fun fact for people who like this stuff. The reason Simbu likes Space Invader, first game that said game over.
Oh, there you go.
I Googled it earlier when we were talking about the game over stuff.
Yeah, a game over, man. Game over. So as you guys could tell, like I'm a pretty big Metroid nut. So for me, this was really special to open up our Fright Fest, our scary October with the Metroid series. Make sure that you stick with the InfernoCast as we continue the month of October. We're going to have some special guests, and we're going to have some spooky games mentioned. So if this is your if you like being scared in more ways than one, definitely recommend that you stick with us, check it out, and subscribe or register for the podcast. Huge thanks to our fantastic cast and crew. And before we sign off, parting shots.
Yeah, I've got one.
Oh, Hardicus.
Isn't Call of Duty Battlefield the Medal of Honor the same game?
Oh, that's a good parting shot. I think on that parting shot, we are going to go ahead and call it, because shots are fired on that. You got thoughts on that? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. And have a good one.